There's a thing you will almost certainly do at least once, and you will not enjoy it. You will stand in a room or a field with people you know. Someone will say words that have been said thousands of times before. Then a body will be put somewhere deliberately, and everyone will go home and eat something. Every human society ever described does some version of this. Not one of them simply leaves the body where it fell. It is one of the very few things about us that is genuinely universal. And like language, nobody can tell you when it started. This is a video about the oldest graves we know of, and about how bitterly people argue over them. Because here's the awkward part. A grave is not an obvious thing to find. Picture a skeleton in the floor of a cave. 90,000 years old, curled on its side, covered in sediment. Is it a burial? Maybe. Or maybe someone died in the cave and the roof shed dirt over them for a century. Maybe a flood washed silt in. Maybe a hyena dragged the body there. Bodies get covered up all the time without anyone intending anything. So archaeologists cannot go looking for a buried body. They have to go looking for intention. And intention does not fossilize any better than speech does. What they look for instead is a short list of very unglamorous details. First, a cut. A hole dug into ground that was already there, with edges you can still trace. Second, articulation. Bones still lying in the arrangement a living body holds them in. If a body rots on an open surface, animals and weather scatter it. Feet end up meters from a skull. A skeleton with its finger bones still in order was covered quickly and covered whole. Third, position. Knees pulled up, arms folded, the same posture again and again at the same site. Weather does not fold arms. Repetition means a rule, and a rule means people agreeing with each other. Fourth, objects in a hole that had no way of falling in by themselves. Those four things together are as close as anyone gets to reading a mind that stopped working 90,000 years ago. Now, the most famous grave in the entire argument. 1953, a cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan called Shanidar. Ralph Seletsky and his team dug there for most of a decade. They found 10 Neanderthals, not one grave, a place people kept coming back to. One of them, known as Shanidar IV, lay on his left side with his knees drawn up. Soil samples from around the body went to a pollen specialist in Paris, Arlette Leroy-Guerin. She found something strange in them. Clumps, not scattered grains, but tight concentrations of whole flower heads. Yarrow, cornflower, groundsel, hollyhock, grape hyacinth. Several of them, she pointed out, are plants used in traditional medicine. In 1968, the interpretation went out into the world. Someone had laid flowers on this man. It is hard to overstate what that did. Seletsky wrote a book about it and called them the first flower people. A species drawn as a shambling brute for 100 years suddenly had a funeral. It is in every textbook. It is probably the single image most people carry of Neanderthals. And in 1999, a researcher named Jeffrey Sommer pointed at a rodent. Marian's persicus, the Persian jird, a burrowing rat common in that region that lives in exactly those cave sediments. It digs tunnels. It hoards seeds and flower heads in chambers along them. And it produces exactly the kind of dense pollen clump found beside Shanidar IV. There were jird burrows in the deposit. Nobody had properly weighed them. That is not a small correction. The most emotionally loaded find in Paleolithic archaeology may have been a rat's pantry. And there it sat for 20 years. Not disproven, simply no longer trustworthy. Then a team went back to Shanidar and dug it again. Emma Pomeroy, Graham Barker, and their colleagues reopened Seletsky's old trench. In the same part of the cave, they found another body and called it Shanidar Z. Modern excavation, sediment blocks lifted out whole and scanned, every layer recorded, and the evidence for deliberate placement held. The body lay in a dip in the cave floor. The head rested against a stone. The sediment around it did not look like a natural collapse. The conclusion published in 2020 was careful, and it was clear these people were placing their dead. So the flowers are probably gone. The funeral is not, which is a fairly good lesson in how this field actually works. But Shanidar is only about 70,000 years old. Go further back. Northern Spain, a limestone hill riddled with caves called Atapuerca. Deep inside one of them, at the bottom of a vertical shaft 13 meters down, is a chamber. It is called Sima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. More than 6,000 human fossils have come out of it. At least 28 individuals, dated to around 430,000 years ago. These are not Neanderthals yet. They are the population Neanderthals came out of. Juan Luis Arzuaga and his colleagues have spent decades down there, and the question is simple. How do 28 people end up at the bottom of a hole? The obvious answer is a carnivore dragged them in, but the bones are almost all human. A hyena den is full of deer and horse. This one is not. There is no sign the chamber was ever lived in. No cars, almost no everyday debris. And there is one object. A single handaxe, made of a pink quartzite that is not used for the ordinary tools at that site. It is unbroken, and it was never used. The excavators named it Excalibur. One beautiful tool in a pit with 28 people and nothing else. That is not proof. Bodies could have gone in over centuries for reasons we cannot recover. But 430,000 years is a very long time before anyone thought this behavior began. Now the other branch of the family, early modern humans, in what is now Israel. Two cave sites, Qafzeh and Skhul, roughly 100,000 years old. At Qafzeh, a teenager was found in a pit cut down into the bedrock. Lying across the chest, held in both hands, was a pair of red deer antlers. Antlers do not fall into a rock-cut pit and land on a chest. In another grave at the same site, a child in red ochre. At Skhul, a man had the lower jaw of a wild boar resting against his ribs. This is the earliest set of graves that almost everyone accepts, and it is already fully formed. A hole, a body arranged inside it, something placed in with them. Nobody has ever found the awkward first draft of this. Ochre keeps turning up, so it is worth a moment on its own. It is iron oxide, ground-up rock, the oldest pigment we use by an enormous margin. It is on the engraved blocks from Blombos Cave in South Africa 75,000 years ago. It is in graves on 4 continents, in periods with no contact between them at all. And it is red. Nobody can tell you why with any confidence, but people separated by 50,000 years reach for the same color. Then there is the site that shows what all of this cost. Sunghir, in Russia, a couple of 100 kilometers east of Moscow, about 34,000 years old. There is an adult man, buried with beads, a headband, and carved pendants. And then there is the second grave, which is one of the strangest things in the whole record. 2 children, laid head to head, pointing in opposite directions. Around them, roughly 10,000 beads carved out of mammoth-ivory. Drilled fox teeth in the hundreds. Carved discs, a small ivory mammoth. And lying beside them, 2 spears made of mammoth tusk. Mammoth tusk is curved. These are straight, and one of them is over 2 meters long. Nobody is certain how you straighten a tusk. Every method anyone has suggested takes days. Archaeologists have sat down and made the beads themselves. Estimates run around half an hour to an hour each. Do that arithmetic for 10,000 beads. You get thousands of hours of work in a world where nobody has spare hour. Put another way, a group of people who owned almost nothing spent a winter's labor on 2 dead children. And one of those children had badly bowed thigh bones from a serious developmental condition. That is the part that matters. This was not a useful child. Grief was expensive, and they paid it anyway. And then in 2015, a hole in the ground in South Africa made a mess of the whole story. The Rising Star Cave system, near Johannesburg. A chamber reached through a passage 18 centimeters wide. Out of it came over 1,500 fossils of a species nobody had seen before. Homo naledi. Small, a brain about 1/3 the size of yours, somewhere around 250,000 years old. And a lot of bodies deep inside a cave that is genuinely difficult to enter with almost no other animal remains. In 2023, Lee Berger's team went further and claimed deliberate burial and engraved marks on the walls. The reaction from the field was blunt. The papers went out as preprints and were criticized hard. Reviewers argued the sediment did not show grave cuts and that the marks on the wall were not dated. This is unresolved, and you should treat any confident answer about it with suspicion. But notice what even the argument does to us. For a century, the assumption was that handling your dead is something big brains do, and do late. Sima de los Huesos pushes it back to 430,000 years. Naledi asks whether the size of the brain was ever the point. So step back and ask what this behavior is actually for. It does nothing for the dead. That is the one thing everybody agrees on. What it does to the living. A funeral takes a private catastrophe and turns it into a public fact at a fixed time with everyone watching. It gives grief a shape and a place and an official end to the formal part of it. It reassigns the jobs the dead person was holding. Someone else is the head of the family now, and everybody saw it happen. Grief is the price of being an animal that forms long attachments. Burial is the machinery we built to survive that price, which is why it is everywhere and why it is so old. 10,000 ivory beads on 2 children. A handaxe nobody ever used. Antlers on a boy's chest. Those are not gifts to the dead. They are the living saying, in the most expensive language they had, that this mattered. You will say the same thing, probably with flowers, which, as it happens, may be the one detail we cannot pin on the Neanderthals after all.